Hello, everyone. Teacher Quentin here, back for part 3 of our series on the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. Today, we will cover SDGs Goals 6 through 8. Now, if you haven't had a chance to watch our other two videos, parts 1 and 2, which covered goals 1 through 5, I would suggest taking a look at those videos because some of the terms and some of the ideas that we will use as we go forward in discussing these 17 Sustainable Development Goals will be topics or vocabulary that we covered in previous videos. So if you haven't, take a chance to watch those parts as well. Okay, so let's get started for today. We will start with goal number 6. So, goal 6 of the UN 17 SDGs is for clean water and sanitation. The UN hopes to ensure the availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. So, what does that mean to ensure clean water and sanitation for all? Let's take a quick look. 2.3 billion people 2.3 billion people live in water-stressed countries as of 2018. Now you may be asking, what is water-stressed? So water stress occurs when the demand for water exceeds the available amount during a certain period of time or when poor quality restricts its use. Now, 2.3 billion people is quite a lot. It's almost a third of those living in the world. And living in a water stressed place can cause a lot of different problems. When we speak about water, clean water and sanitation, both of those depend on the availability and the quality of the water that you have in the area where you live. So let's take a moment to just imagine that you didn't have access to clean water, or that all the water that you drank or cooked with you had to boil before you were able to drink it to make it safe. These are the living conditions that some people around the world have to deal with. Also, billions of people still lack access to safe drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene. So in 2020, 2 billion people, or 26% of the world, lacked safely managed drinking water. 3.6 billion people, or 46% of the world, lacked safely managed sanitation. And 2.3 billion people, or 29% of the world, lack basic hygiene. So what is sanitation? Sanitation is public conditions that are related to clean drinking water and sewage disposal. So think about where all of the dirty water goes. Usually, most of us who are watching this video may live in places where if you have waste from your home, like from the restroom, or maybe when it rains and the water from the streets goes into a sewer, this water goes someplace, it is treated for bacteria and viruses before it is put back into the water system for you to drink. However, this doesn't happen in all places, and sometimes sewage disposal or even access to drinking water is restricted. Now, hygiene is something that we've heard a lot about since the onset of the pandemic with COVID-19. So, hygiene are conditions and actions that promote good health and the prevention of disease, especially through cleanliness. So, in many places around the world, they lack the resources, that is, clean water and proper sewage disposal, to even have proper hygiene. And so these are all part of the UN's sixth goal of making sure that there is clean water and sanitation for all people around the world. Moving on now to goal number 7. Goal 7 is affordable and clean energy. So the UN hopes to ensure access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable modern energy for all. Now, recently, we've heard a lot about clean energy, probably because of climate change and global warming. But what we don't often think about is that in many areas of the world, even having energy, no matter the source of the energy, is difficult to come by. And so the UN, as a part of goal number 7, wants to assure affordable and clean energy for all around the world. Let's look at some more of the details. 1/3 of the world's population uses dangerous or inefficient cooking systems. Now you may ask, why are we talking about cooking systems when we are thinking about clean and reusable energy? Well, this is because when people use dangerous and inefficient cooking systems, it can cause a lot of environmental and personal health hazards. So, what do we mean by inefficient? Inefficient is wasting or failing to make the best use of time or resources. So many things can be inefficient. Just think about when you've maybe had a homework assignment or written a paper where you maybe took a little bit longer than you thought that you would, or maybe a part of the process took a lot longer than you wished it or you hoped it would have. Maybe this was an inefficient use of your time. And so, inefficient is a word that we use not only for things like cooking or processes in that way, but also just in our daily lives, things can be inefficient. Also, 759 million people lack access to electricity. 3 out of 4 of them live in sub Saharan Africa. So, if you watched one of our previous videos, we spoke about quality healthcare and how that is a it's a big need in sub-Saharan Africa. And back in that video, we described what sub-Saharan Africa is. But here in this picture, you can see that it is a region in Africa that lacks many resources, and in this case, lacks electricity. 3 out of 4 of the people in sub-Saharan Africa live without electricity. All right. And for this video, our last goal, we will talk about goal number 8, which for the UN is decent work and economic goals. So the UN wants to promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. So in previous videos, we've talked a little bit about gender equality, which also included having equal representation of women in the workforce. Well, this goal also speaks a little bit to that because, again, we're going to go back to wanting to have an inclusive and sustainable economic growth. And in order to be inclusive, that means that we include all people, despite whether they are women or men or where they live or come from, or ethnic backgrounds. This is being inclusive. And the UN's 8th goal of decent work and economic goals is inclusive of all people. The pandemic has led to the loss of the equivalent of 255 million full-time jobs. About 4 times the number lost during the global financial crisis between 2007 and 2008. Now, some of you may remember this recession or economic crisis that occurred during the years of 2007 to 2009. But even if you don't, this current recession or economic downfall is 4 times as worse as that one, which was the worst that we had seen in decades. So what do we mean by full-time work? Full-time work is going to vary a little bit depending on what country or where you live, but typically a full-time job is a job that provides 35 to 40 or more working hours per week. In some countries, including those like the United States, it may also include other benefits like health insurance or retirement. Another big part of the economic situation around the world is international tourist arrivals. So those fell from 1.5 billion in 2019 before the pandemic to only 381 million in 2020. And international tourism is not expected to return to 2019 levels for up to 4 years. So you might ask, why do we include tourism as an issue when we talk about economic development? Why does tourism matter? Well, tourism, especially international tourism, often supports a variety of industries within a community, including hotels, restaurants, local vendors, and more. And so many places around the world that rely on tourism or people coming to visit and spend their money in these places are definitely struggling since COVID 19, when many people were either not allowed to travel due to restrictions imposed by different governments, or it was unsafe for people to travel because of the risk of infection from COVID 19. Also, thinking about the fact that this loss of economic development and loss of money could take up to 4 years to come back to pre pandemic levels is also concerning, because many of the vendors, local business owners, even hotels and restaurants cannot afford to continue to pay employees or continue to have their businesses open if they don't see a return of the tourist income that they had relied on for so many years before the pandemic. Also, the pandemic will lead to an increase in youth non-employed, in school, or in training. So what does this mean? So we've talked about in a previous video quality education for all and wanting all children to have access to education. But even in places where children do not attend school all the way through secondary or high school, most of children have some type of employment or training that they will attend. But the pandemic has led to an increase of those children or young adults not being employed in school or in some type of training. For young women, that number is up to 31%. And for young men, it's up to 14%. So this is the percentage of youth around the world that are not either in school, employed, or in some type of training program. So as we can see that our youth are the future of where we want to go as a world. And if we're seeing these low numbers of youth not being educated or not being a part of the workforce, this leads to concerns and why the UN has established this 8th goal. I hope that you have enjoyed this video explaining goals 5 through 8, or through, I'm sorry, goals 6 through 8 of the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Please stay tuned for further videos where we will go through the next remaining goals, which are goals 9 through 17. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.